Hello, Joanna's on vacation, and so I'm here, taking over her channel for the day to give you a video for some summer book recommendations. The summer is nearly done, at least in my part of the world, but in case you want to squeeze in a couple more great summer reads, I have 10 for you because YouTube likes the number 10. I've broken it into 3 categories. We're going to talk about some nautical reads, we're going to talk about some adventures, some fun, lighthearted adventures, and then we're going to talk about stuff that's settings-based. And for this list, I did my best to specifically recommend books that I think Joanna would read herself and like. So there are certain books that I started to put on the list and then stopped because you're Joanna's audience, not mine. So I tried to be specific to what she might engage in as well, or be interested in. Starting with the nautical category, we're gonna start off with the Live Ship Traders trilogy. This is Robin Hobb. She's a very slow burn author, which I know Joanna loves. Hobb is so good at immersing you in her world, at really getting you engaged in the characters and in the setting and in the social politics of what's happening at the time. She really makes the setting as well as what's going on in the world at the time that the story is taking place, kind of its own character as well. So this follows a certain family. They're traders. They trade goods and supplies, and they have a live ship. A live ship is a ship made from wizard wood, and it is able to be quickened, which allows it to, essentially it becomes sentient. And at the same time that this ship is becoming sentient, the leader of the house also dies on the ship. However, the ship doesn't pass on to the next generation quite in the way that they expected things to happen, which causes a lot of family drama. And we follow multiple members of this family setting sail to sea, going their own way, staying at home and trying to maintain things because the family is in kind of a rough financial position. We follow certain characters that are super easy to hate, who take things in a direction that the family maybe shouldn't be going in. We also follow a pirate king who's somehow tied to all this as well. So it is set at sea, it is nautical, but it also is this very vast, expansive story that covers a lot of stuff at once. Highly recommend, love this trilogy. Next up, I have another story that you might want to just take with you by the water and read over the entire summer, or maybe the series over several summers. To me, the most obvious recommendation for you for a summer read, especially in the settings category, is The Lord of the Rings. I chose not to do that because you know about The Lord of the Rings. But if you like that sort of very slow, steady kind of story where you're going through life with the characters and you're experiencing their day-to-day as well as their adventures, then and you want it to be nautical, if you want it, I do recommend the Jack Aubrey series, the Aubrey Maturin novels. The first book is called Master and Commander. It's by Patrick O'Brien. This follows a man named Jack Aubrey who gets the opportunity to captain the Sophie. This is a ship that he's so proud. He's so excited to get to be the captain. And his best friend, his closest comrade, comes on ship with him and they set sail, and they go through a lot of trials at sea. We see a lot of their day-to-day. We see a lot of their inner ship, the crewmates' strife. We see a lot of action as they capture other ships and take on their prizes. We see a lot of humanity out of Jack as he kind of lets certain things get to his head and get under his skin, and a lot of camaraderie between him and Stephen. It's the kind of story that, at least for me, I take very slowly. I read just a few chapters a day. It's a very cozy kind of classic read for me. And there was a movie made for the series, Master and Commander, also excellent. Okay, keeping it nautical, but picking up the action a little bit, let's talk about Red Seas Under Red Skies. Okay, I had to do it. I don't have a choice. I'm doing my best to match recommendations to Joanna, but I am me, so The Lies of Locke Lamora. This is the sequel to The Lies of Locke Lamora. This is the second book in the Gentleman Bastard series, my favorite series. And Red Seas Under Red Skies, Locke and Jean are blackmailed into becoming pirates for hire. So a large portion of this book takes place at sea. They have to learn the ropes. They have to figure out how to captain a ship. They basically have to figure out how to fake it really. But of course, as is the nature of these books, it doesn't all go exactly as planned. It doesn't all go quite to their expectations, but they're really good at making it up as they go, and so they do. Lots of action, lots of time at sea, a little bit of romance, a little bit of tragedy, a whole lot of friendship. This book is incredible, and I realize that you may not have read The Lies of Locke Lamora, so how can you get to this? I'll tell you how you can. You should read The Lies of Locke Lamora. And then my final nautical pick, there were a couple of books that I almost put as my final nautical pick, but none of them really quite felt like Joanna, and so I'm going kind of out on a limb here with talking about a current read, Darkwater Daughter. I'm not done with it yet, so it might suck, but it's had a very strong start. So Darkwater Daughter follows a storm singer, so she's a woman who has the gift of being able to sing to control the water, the tides. She can create a storm at sea, she can call down the rains, she can do little and large things just by singing, and it's so cool. So she is now, at the very beginning of the novel, she has been captured by some pirates. She's in a very precarious situation, and one of the people on deck is our other perspective, who isn't really cool with what's happening, but also doesn't really have a choice. Again, I'm not very far into it, but it is nautical, it's set at sea, the writing is very good, I'm instantly hooked, and I don't know if you'll like it, because I don't know if I'll like it, but right now, I do. Next up, we're going into the adventure category. I'm gonna start with the Lady Trent series. So this is a 5-book series. I've read all 5 books, though I only own 2 because I switched to audiobook for the last 3. But the first book is called A Natural History of Dragons. So this is a fantasy sci-fi, and it's also a very classic feeling book. I don't remember what the time period it's set in, but it feels a little bit Jane Austen. So Isabella, our main character, is a naturalist. She is in love with studying dragons, but she lives in a time period where women's rights weren't the thing to do. They weren't in fashion. They weren't the style of the period. So she can't pursue her dreams, or at least not easily. She really has to fight for that right, and fight she does. So this is told from the perspective of her memoirs. She has already lived her life. She's already accomplished everything, and now she's writing her memoirs and she's telling her story a little bit more in depth. You've probably already read her research findings. You probably already know her greatest accomplishments, so now she's telling her story, and it's all told from this tone of an old woman who's lived her life and doesn't really care what you think about her anymore. So she'll tell you about her mistakes, she'll tell you about the greatest accomplishments she's had, but she'll tell it to you from the perspective of, oh, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just really trying. And it's all fiction, obviously. Dragons are involved in everything, and I will say it's light on dragons in the beginning because we're in the beginning of her career, but as the books progress, we progressively get more and more dragons. I loved these books. I loved Isabella, and by the time I got through book 5, I was so emotionally invested in her success. I was genuinely proud of both the career success that she accomplished as well as her personal internal success that she had in her life and in her character and in her family, and I was just so proud of her as a person. I really love these books. You probably already know the story of Treasure Island. It's one of the more popular adventure pirate stories, so I just want to put it back on your radar in case you haven't read it yet, because it truly is a treasure. It's such a lovely adventure to go on with so many twists and turns, some of which, sadly, I already knew the answer to just because it's such a piece of pop culture, but it's still so well worth the read. This is a book that I read for the first time because my cousin rereads it every year, and when we went to Puerto Rico, he let me borrow the book and I got to read it for the first time in Puerto Rico, and now I've read it the one time and I'm gonna reread it next time we go back, and I'm gonna read it to my son because this is just such an exciting, thrilling adventure, and I want him to experience it before he gets to the spoilers just out in the world. So if you haven't read it yet, give it some of your time. It's very short and it's such a delight to read. It's such an exciting, fun adventure. And if you just want to sit by the water or sit by some trees and sit down and just read a story about pirates, man, it's a good one. Final adventure book I'm going to recommend is going to be a bit of an odd one, but the reason I'm choosing it, well, I'll tell you the book and then I'll tell you the reason. I would say Discworld is a great book for the summer, but I really do feel like this is kind of a perfect summer read, and the reason is because of the nature of what Discworld is. These books are very short, they're quick to read, they're witty, they're full of banter, they're full of humor, but they're also full of some things that make you go, I need to think about that a little bit. There are a lot of good entry places for Discworld. The one I'm holding up right now is Guards Guards. This was my first Discworld book, and it follows Carrot, who's a human who's been raised by dwarfs, and he's now going into the city to experience life outside of life with the dwarves, and he joins the City Watch, which is a group of guards in charge of taking care of the city that is very strange. Their laws, what's normal about them, all those things. But each individual book also tackles a different issue, and so it's loaded with humor, but it's also loaded with, but why do we think the way that we do? But why is this normal? So they're fast, they're easy, they're a delight. These books are very hopeful in tone. Even when tackling very serious issues, it still has a very hopeful kind of feel to it and a hopeful resolution, which at times I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, sure, it would be great if we all just understood each other better and then move forward better people. That's not always the way these things go, but it does make it for a very delightful summer read because you get to think a little bit, you get to be challenged a little bit, you get to laugh a lot, and at the end you walk away feeling good about the experience. Just in general, I think you should read Discworld if you haven't yet. Okay, on to settings. Next, we're gonna talk about The Monk and the Robot. Now, this wasn't my favorite book. I did enjoy it, but it wasn't one that I really talk about a lot because it's not my style so much. But if we're talking about settings, this is the one. This is a sci-fi book. Again, we're talking about a very hopeful story where we look into the future, and unlike most sci-fi, we assume that life has gotten better. People have worked with technology in a positive way as AI has continued to expand and become sentient and develop its own personality and thought process and all of that. We as humans, instead of resisting that, have worked with it, and now we have a whole new kind of ecosystem and social system with technology. It's very hopeful. But anyway, it also tackles the idea that just because life is improving doesn't mean that mental health has disappeared. You can still experience depression, anxiety, concerns, questions, and we follow a character who works as a tea, I don't remember the official title, but the main character serves tea. And essentially the book is this character and a robot walking through the forest and talking. But the setting, being in the trees, going on a walk through this world, is a major, major part of what this book is. So if you want a book that's a walk through the trees while you have a whole bunch of introspection, I mean, it's a novella. It's like 100 pages. Maybe give it a go. Next, I'm going to pick The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. This is a book about a village that is plagued by frequent storms, devastating storms that near wipe out the village, that they need a lot of reconstruction after they come in, and people's lives are in danger, and they're all caused by the sea god. Yeah, the sea god. Look at me remembering things. So what this village does is once a year they sacrifice a girl to the ocean, to the sea god. Hopefully he'll accept her as his bride. The goal is that he'll find his bride and he'll stop having these storms, these fits that affect them, and then they'll be at peace. So far, it only quells his rage for a year at a time. So this book begins where Mina actually sacrifices herself to the sea god, and then the whole book takes place under the sea. It takes place in his realm. And I describe this as really feeling like a Studio Ghibli film. If you enjoy Studio Ghibli movies, then you might be interested in this. It feels like a taste of a lot of things. There's so many different strange spirit world things that are introduced for a moment and then you move on to the next thing. So my biggest complaint about this book is I would love for the world to get more emphasis, to be explored more, for these little tastes of the spirit world that we got. I want to stay there longer and I want to explore it more. It's a short book and too much of it is taken up by romance. It's not even that bad. I'm just a brat. I want the world to be more of the story, but if you'll go in knowing that, and you're okay with many tastes of this expansive spirit world under the water, oh my goodness, I fell in love with this world more than any other part of this story. Final recommendation is one that I probably shouldn't even recommend. I don't think Joanna would like it, I don't think you would like it, but here I am. Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. So Daphne du Maurier is one of my favorite authors. She writes settings in a way that just strikes me. And this is a seaside setting. This follows a character, Donna, who she's dissatisfied with her life. French pirates are docking here for a time, and she goes on an adventure. It's piracy, it's learning this new life, it's adventure, it's exciting, there's a romance, though I don't condone any of Donna's choices, but I did feel the sea breeze in my hair and the sea water splashing up on my face while I was going on the boat to pillage. I don't know, it's weird. I don't think anybody would like it. But I do, because it's du Maurier that wrote it. If you want a setting that feels like a normal person going on a pirate adventure for a moment, and you don't think too hard about all the decisions made along the way, I don't know, I just loved it. Okay, those were the 10, because again, if I put 10 in the title, Joanna's video will, be better for her channel. But I'm gonna go ahead and give you 3 more. In case you like nonfiction, here's a couple of nautical, summertime nonfictions that I really enjoyed. First of all, Island of the Lost. This follows this is nonfiction, truth. 2 separate shipwrecks that happened on the same island at the same time on opposite sides of the islands, and they didn't even know each other existed because the island is you can't get across it. So they didn't even know each other existed, but amazingly enough, one shipwreck had some good leadership and had some good organization, and they were able to band together and problem solve and really get through it. And then the other shipwreck didn't have those things, and it was bad. So it's just fascinating to read about 2 shipwrecks that happened at the same time in the same place under very similar circumstances with very different human results based largely on leadership. Like, I just think that's fascinating. And naturally, the shipwreck where things went well got more documentation. There were more journal entries. And so it is kind of, the book is more heavily focused on them, sadly. But we do get some of the other shipwreck too. And it was interesting. Another shipwreck that I really enjoyed reading about was The Wager. This is a naval ship that shipwrecked in Brazil, and in this really remote area of Brazil. And at first they tried to survive. They weren't doing great. Then some natives found them and worked with them and communed with them, and they started thriving. And then freaking Mitchell and so a couple of other people ruined everything, and then it went bad again. I remember Mitchell's name. I think I'll remember his name forever. Anyway, what happened here is that they tried to survive for a long time. Once again, poor leadership or indecisive leadership was a very big factor in why they suffered as long as they did. And then eventually the crew split. Some of them went north, some of them went south. One group of the crewmen washed up on shore somewhere, and they were praised for their ingenuity, for their survival skills, for all that they accomplished to be able to come back. And then months later, the rest of them showed up somewhere else, and they said, "Mutiny. Liars, you left us to die." And it's these 2 warring stories of one crew and how they survived, what they went through. This is their stories. I loved this. The first third of it was a little bit slow, but once you get into part 2, my goodness. And finally, if you're into pirates and you want to read some nonfiction about some true pirates, The Republic of Pirates was excellent. I've read several pirate nonfictions that all basically say the same thing, and this is my favorite one. So if you want one and you don't know where to go, I say here, because They all tell the same stories, but this one did it in the most engaging, yet not too condensed way that I've read. This video is long enough. I hope you enjoyed getting a couple of summer book recommendations. Maybe one of them might interest you. Thanks for watching, and I promise to give Joanna back her channel now. If you haven't already, subscribe to show Joanna some love, and she will see you in her next video. Bye!